Well, good afternoon, and thanks for attending. My name is Jeff Dre. I think we're going to have an interesting session today. I've had the opportunity to spend some time with each of our panelists. So my personal background is materials for advanced electronics, semiconductors, biosensors. But the reason I was asked to moderate the panel today is the last 18 years I've been deeply plugged into the entrepreneurial and startup scene here in San Diego. I was a past president of TechCon San Diego chapter, and then later was asked to be the board of governors chair of all the chapters. And at the time, we were the largest angel investing network in the country. So I've seen plenty of pitches and gotten to know the needs of entrepreneurs as well as the needs of investors. And I think we're going to have a very fascinating panel today. So I'm going to let each of the panelists do an introduction, talk a little bit about their background, and then we can dive into some pertinent questions. Great. Tarek?
Thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tarek Khan. I'm a clinical associate professor of marketing and leadership at New York University. My background, I spent first 20 years working for corporate America, large Fortune companies in marketing. And about 15 years ago, I became an entrepreneur, started my own consulting firm, focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've been affiliated with NYU for the last 18 years. About 2 years ago, I became a full-time clinical faculty member. I wrote a book about 2 years ago, Leadership in Changing Times. And I'm heavily involved in the nonprofit sector also. Some nonprofit organization, including organization of entrepreneurs, Pakistani entrepreneurs professionals, which is a global organization. I'm the president of that global organization as well.
Thank you. Ized?
First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to sunny San Diego. I'm actually in the Bay Area, located in the Bay Area. I'm an associate professor of entrepreneurship in the Bay Area, California State East Bay. I'm also the director for Smith Center for Entrepreneurship. I did find two companies is along my academic journey. I'm advising some venture capital firms. I'm helping some companies to establish their R&D strategies in the Bay Area. But I'm very glad to be connected to San Diego ecosystem. So it's really exciting to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Ized. Hala?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Hala Maganoff. I'm the Vice President for Research and Innovation at SDSU. My background is in public health and really had nothing to do with entrepreneurship for most of my career except for the last few years. Lots of community-based work, which the more I learned about entrepreneurship has overlaid to a lot of the work we do around understanding how the companies impact communities and how you work with clients. So there, in terms of some of the work, there's definitely some of the same concept. My role at SDSU involves supporting the entrepreneurship ecosystem of not only the university, but being a public university here in the region with partners like Paul here at UCSD is really impacting the entrepreneurship ecosystem and innovation ecosystem of the region, and how not only do we produce students that are part of the workforce, know the workforce, but also understand the innovation ecosystem and how we connect them. So a lot of the work we do is involving things like hosting, welcome to San Diego State today, hosting conferences like this, we more recently acquired the Angel Conference for the region, but also building, right now working to build 1.6 million square feet of innovation space in the heart of San Diego as a place to connect the corporates, the public entities with the university to really accelerate innovation while providing these opportunities to our local ecosystem and our students. Also recently, the last 2 years, we partnered with Techstars and brought it to San Diego, so that's kind of generally how I made it here.
Cool. Hi, everyone. So I'm Paul Roten. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Innovation at UCSD, the other public institution, and very nice to be here at SDSU today. My background, I'm a biologist once upon a time. I was a postdoc actually at UCSD many, many years ago. I'm not going to admit how many. Then I ran a bunch of biotech companies here in San Diego until the dot-com thing. I went back to Ireland at that point and ran the Irish government's startup business, if you like, for a number of years. But the weather was really, really bad in Ireland, so decided to come back to beautiful San Diego. Worked at Salk for a while, did the industry stuff for them, and then came to UCSD about almost 10 years ago now, which I can't believe, to work for the Chancellor to build up this innovation office. We do all of the usual, intellectual property and tech transfer and all of that stuff. We also coordinate a lot of the activities and run a lot of entrepreneurship programs, innovation programs across the campus, across the region. For many of the same reasons that Hal has outlined, really trying to build up the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in San Diego to the benefit of us all, right? So that's my background.
Well, thank you, Paul. So since we're here at San Diego State, I'd like to start with Hala, if that's okay. And I'd like to actually get going in our best Socratic method. So let's challenge the premise, if we could. So the title of today's discussion is Inspiring the Next Generation, the role of academic institutions in driving innovation and entrepreneurship. Should academic institutions have a role in driving entrepreneurship, and if so, why?
I love the question. Yes, and I'll tell you why. I think I mentioned this to a couple of people I've talked to over the last few days. Is my perspective is academic institutions historically have not only trained the workforce, driven and created researchers and scientists, they've also contributed to a region's economic development. They were part of how the science got translated, commercialized, spun off companies, and those companies became a place, these companies became bigger and provided more workforce in the region. And I think if you look in the last 30 years, maybe 50 years even, there's been a decline in some institutions doing that because of budgetary issues, and other institutions really doing it well. And I think more and more what we're seeing, institutions going back to the root of their role is not just training students, their role is also an economic development engine for their regions, especially public institutions. And so when you think about that as a fundamental reason why we should be a driver of innovation, why we should be training our students to think about it, because the more they understand it, I always joke, if you ask most people what entrepreneurship means, they kind of have a general sense. But if you really dig into students who are on campuses where entrepreneurship is a concept that's really hammered and exposed and all of that, they really are the people you will see in their regions driving. They might go work for a company for 5 years, but they're not going to stay at that company forever. They will always go back to being part of this ecosystem. So that's why we want to do it and why we should be part of it.
Great answer, that makes a lot of sense. Paul, I want to go to you next. And I can actually talk about the program at UCSD at great length. You could probably imagine. When I first joined Tech Coast Angels, the program of entrepreneurship at UCSD looked dramatically different than it does now. I'm a big fan. There's so many programs there. Could you kind of at least highlight some of the key points of UCSD and the big changes that have taken place in the last 10 years?
Okay, how long do you have? Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's been massive changes at UCSD in terms of entrepreneurship, and I just want to piggyback a little bit off Hala's comments as well. I mean, the answer to your last question is, of course, yes. I don't think that there is a technology, entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it, ecosystem in the world that doesn't have at its center a very large university, right? There's a reason why there's 500 plus companies within 5 miles of UCSD and SDSU, because it's the talent and it's the technologies and it's all that money, public money that we spend developing those technologies. We're hitting $2 billion at UCSD. So the answer is yes. Without us, honestly, you don't have these vibrant ecosystems. So to get to your next question of UCSD, there's been massive change at UCSD. I mean, honestly, if you came to us 10 or 15 years ago, we were not necessarily the partner of choice for industry. We were viewed as being a very bureaucratic, difficult organization to work with. Now we are just a very bureaucratic but an easy organization to work with, which is, it's progress, it's great. We've put an awful lot of resources, both time and money and effort, into building up our ability to transfer technologies off our campus, right, in a much, much easier way. So for example, at UCSD, if you're a startup company, you can take license to any of our technologies for no money at all. 5% dilutable equity and you're done, right? We just hope that you'll actually do something with it and not sit on the technology. We give licenses to technology before they're created to big pharma and the whole lot. It's basically our whole philosophy on working at that level with industry has completely changed to one of, we have to protect our assets, to one of the way to protect our assets is to get it out there as fast as we possibly can so somebody can actually make a product or service out of it to all of our benefit. The other piece that I guess has really changed is the entrepreneurial piece, which, startups and so on. But we view entrepreneurship, as I think Kala alluded to actually, entrepreneurship is a way of thinking, right? Entrepreneurship is creating people who see opportunities where other people see problems, where they're comfortable with risk, they're okay with uncertainty, they know how to build teams around stuff, they know when they don't know what they don't know, right? So these people are going to be active contributors to our economy no matter what career choice they take. That's what we view entrepreneurship as. The Chancellor has said that all 45,000 students on UCSD have to have the opportunity to experience entrepreneurship. We are close to that, I would say. In my programs, we have almost 4,000 students going through that a year, and you have about 60 different programs across the campus at this point. It's reflected in the startups as well. We didn't do startups 15 years ago. They were a terrible thing. This evil sort of, industry stuff coming. Now we are in the top 5 campuses in the country, up there with the Stanfords and Harvards in terms of starting companies. And they're raising more and more money. We're up to about $2 billion last year of what they've raised. So the whole ethos has changed. And we need to keep driving that. We need to be looking at the next evolution of that. It has to be porous, it has to be transparent, there has to be this incredible exchange of both people and ideas between us and the community, government, industry, investors, the military, etc. And how, we can talk about that later, but there's new ideas on how to actually achieve that.
Thanks, Paul. Is that, as I mentioned before, we've had a chance to talk earlier, and you mentioned some experiences in Europe and Turkey and some other environments and entrepreneurs. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of similarities on what we are talking here. We're all talking about building an ecosystem. And this is why we are here in San Diego. San Diego is also trying to build an ecosystem around innovation and entrepreneurship. And a similar challenge is faced by many parts of Europe and especially in places that, especially not like London or Netherlands or Germany, where you would think that the innovation clusters are there, but places like Portugal. I was invited for a conference, like an innovation conference in south of Portugal, because most of the innovation happens in Lisbon, the Web Summit, which everybody does. If you have any founders in the room, you guys should actually go to Web Summit, which is a great conference for you guys to be connected to European startup ecosystem. But most of the activity is happening in north of Portugal, not in south of Portugal. While the south of Portugal is an amazing place. It's actually, I'm not going to say it's as cool as San Diego, but it's really a nice place to be. Really good beaches, nice weather and everything. High net worth individuals, some people who have exited from Silicon Valley decided to move back to south of Portugal. And the challenge there is they're trying to build an ecosystem, and that actually takes a village. And this is similar to what we have been talking there, where you need the university support and also the government and the business needs to be in, which is Henry Eskevet's model of triple helix of innovation, where you need all these fundamental 3 stakeholders to build that ecosystem, right? So out of what I have observed there is mindset is very important, right? So you can build buildings, you can build structures, you can bring in money, you can have the government support, you can have the amazing talent, changing the mindset is so challenging. And I'm not even now talking about Europe or Turkey. We experienced a similar challenge back in East Bay because we are surrounded by Stanford, Berkeley, all these hotshots of innovation and entrepreneurship, where as Cal State East Bay, most of our students are first generation university students. They're the first ones who went to college in their family. It's very hard to change their mindset in terms of making them believe that they can be the frontiers of innovation and change in the future, right? So that's the biggest challenge. So bringing back just a quick answer to your question, it really takes a village, but sometimes it starts with more like subtle things as trying to build that mindset first before building into infrastructure and other things. But as you said, it might seem as like slow at the beginning, but once it kicks up, and we are seeing this happening in south of Portugal. This year there were 400 startups that applied to the program, and then 3 years ago it was only 25 startups that applied to the program. So once it kicks up, it really grows organic, and that's what you want, I guess, in these systems.
Thanks, Izad. So, Tarek, you're our New York East Coast representative. Thank you so much for coming all this way. Right? It's relatively trivial for the rest of us, not said necessarily, but it's quite a trek for you. We talked before about many, but two very interesting things. The first of which was the contrast between East Coast and West Coast, sort of the philosophies of entrepreneurism and startups. Tell me about this. How do you see this contrast?
Thank you. The interesting part is if you really look at the education system overall, the first university in the world started in the 8th century in Fez, Morocco, led by a woman, actually. If you think about it, in 1,200 years, not much has changed in terms of the education. And the entrepreneurship has always been there, but I think in the last 30 or 40 years it has become more attractive. Thanks to Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg of the world, that they have, entrepreneurship has always been there, but now people actually want to be an entrepreneur. 6 or 7 years ago, I was speaking at a conference like this at Harvard, and one young girl stood up and asked me that you have worked 20 years in corporate and you've been an entrepreneur for 7, 8 years by then. What's the difference between an entrepreneur and working for a company? And so when you work for a company, your salary is guaranteed, but your job is not guaranteed. When you're an entrepreneur, your job is guaranteed, but your salary is not guaranteed, right? So it's that point about the mindset change. New York is the true representation of the capitalist financial services hub of America or the world. And the Silicon Valley in Southern California, is the innovative hub of the entrepreneurship. Now, I don't give people advice, I only share my experience. The experience that I'm seeing at NYU is not immune to that completely. One industry that has not been attacked by innovators or disruptors is the education. It's a $4 trillion business industry. NYU, just a university out of East Coast, the annual budget of NYU is over $17 billion. 26,000 employees for 50,000 students. It's just like any other large organization, but somehow our innovators have not attacked. And what's happening in the education, at least in the East Coast, we are still creating entrepreneurs, and we are creating ecosystem. But every entrepreneur, and I teach a leadership class, there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and leader. Some entrepreneurs are leaders, but not all of them. But they all think they are leaders. So the companies that fail is not because their idea was not innovative or they were not smart enough, because they lacked some leadership skills. And I think when you look at the adaptive versus flexibility in leadership and entrepreneurship, that plays a critical role. I think our education system needs to be refreshed and revisited, how we are producing future leaders. And most of the most successful entrepreneurs, if you talk to them and ask them how much of the education system have contribution to their success, it's abysmal, right? So I think the education system needs to be revisited. Some of the institutions are doing a great job in creating entrepreneurs, but I think we really need to go back and look that, because education by strategy teaches you what to do, not how to do it, because that's a practical life. And I think that's where we need to really revisit and see how we can prepare tomorrow's leaders and entrepreneurs by focusing on and giving them a conducive workplace or environment where they actually learn how to do things.
Very interesting. So, you and I talked about, and after this, I want to get into some very tactical information for entrepreneurs, because I know there are entrepreneurs or future entrepreneurs here in the audience. But there was one concept we talked about in your book, I think, and you refer to it as humanites. Talk about that if you will.
So today, there are about 3.4 million robots in the workforce. So my first book was about leadership in changing times. And the next one that I'm working on is leading the next generation. So when we talk about next generation, what do you think? The Gen Zs, the Alpha, the Betas, right? I don't want to scare you, but many of your grandchildren will have relationship with robots. First, it will start as roommates, and then it will convert into something else. And the reason is because if we believe research, as all academia, we do believe, right now 3.4 million robots in workplace. By 2050, it'll be 300 million. And if you believe Elon Musk, he says 10 billion. So again, that's a different discussion. So when you really have to work and engage with them, leading and working with them is a completely different engagement. I don't think as humans we are prepared to really adapt them and accept them in our ecosystem. But the next challenge that's coming is how do we really manage that relationship, and how do we define the rules of engagement? First we don't know who they are and how they behave, right? It's the EQ versus IQ. We are focusing a lot on AI, and everyone should, because artificial intelligence is the future. But don't forget the OI, which is the original intelligence that really made the AI. So I think that that's an interesting discussion, and the academia is not focusing as much on this humanizing their concept as much as they ought to.
Thank you. Okay, I won't take the whole session on this topic. It's very interesting. Hala, I promised some entrepreneurs here in the audience, and I know there are, some specific tactical information. Let's assume there is a grad student here, has an idea, who is sure that it's innovative, that it's valuable, that it could be implemented. They're here at San Diego State. What do? What does San Diego State offer for that entrepreneur?
How is that my question? My team is here. I'm just kidding. We have a ton. San Diego State starts with our Love and Entrepreneurship Center, where there is the education piece of it, which is a lot of what you were talking about, Paul, around the mindset component. So understanding what it means, how do you become an entrepreneur, and how do you even understand that concept. Then if you have an idea, which is, I guess, where the graduate student you're referring to would be, we have an actual incubator. And the incubator, the Zip Launchpad, the Zon Innovation Platform, is the on-campus incubator. Students can come in and take that idea and really go through the process. And by that, I mean everything from doing customer discovery to really working with our board that provides input, to entrepreneurs in residence. And we do a lot of activities, like one of my favorite parts of Zon is, of the Zip Launchpad, is actually we have every semester 60 interns. And those interns' focus is really providing the services for this entrepreneur in terms of the things they don't know. So if you're an engineer with an idea, you don't know anything about marketing or design, we put around you a team of individuals that can provide, other students from the campus that provide those additional services so that you really can think about it. We have an actual prototyping lab, an idea lab, where the whatever product it is you're trying to do, you actually have a way to prototype it. Then we have a number of activities for you to pitch those ideas. We go through the whole process, pitch deck, input, all of those things. We have a lot of opportunities for you to then take that and put it into a real world setting. We have everything from allowing that graduate students to pitch their idea to actually the other way, which is we bring to our students problems, the social innovation challenge. And that one is not just open to SDSU, it's open to actually our entire educational system in the region. So UCSD students, USD, Point Loma, their students come in, and this year is focused on food insecurity, for example, and they can come in.
Sorry, that's actually a really key point. Many institutions are very internal focused. SDSU's pretty gracious, in my opinion, opening up their programs beyond just the students. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for saying that, and that's absolutely true. And we really want to be a place where entrepreneurship is viewed for the entire region as a place they can come to us. So whether it's prototyping activities, like I said, it exists for a student, but that's open to anyone. It's not really focused internally. And it's a pipeline that we focus on from high school, middle school students. You'll hear a bunch of students today pitch, not after this, the session after, but they're part of New Fund and they're doing their own pitch competition. But that's something we supported out of the university as well. So really thinking about all those opportunities for our students. They also have incredible mentors internally. So while I talked about the network of entrepreneurs in residence and board members that support our students, our faculty spend a lot of time with those students thinking about those activities. There's so much more I could talk about our ecosystem. We're about to start hosting the Angel Conference, which is another opportunity for our students to understand what angel investing even is, and how do you not only maximize it when you're starting your company, but how do you actually become one. And so it's all of those components of the whole journey. My team is working on visualizing that whole ecosystem that we're part of, because it is massive.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. That's kind of exactly the kind of answer I was looking for. Paul, similarly, when you and I were talking, you mentioned a quote from your school management that I thought was very interesting, and a quote that I don't think you would have heard 10 years ago. The quote was from your school management: every student should have the opportunity to have an entrepreneurial experience. That's a very different mindset than the UC system had 10 years ago.
Yeah, that was actually the Chancellor. That's every time he meets me, he says, right, all 45,000 had an entrepreneurial experience this year, right? And it's because of what Tarek said, actually. I think you put it very well. Universities are very good at teaching students what to do, but not how to do it. Entrepreneurship is about how to do it, right? It's about, through experience and mentor support, developing those skills to take something that you have, an idea or whatever, through to some sort of an impact. And on that journey, learn how you yourself can grow as somebody who can actually develop that impact. So it's a nice complement to what we do in our academic curricula. And I think that's why the Chancellor wants everybody to have that experience.
Thank you. Izet, you're kind of located in a unique place for entrepreneurism. You are in the heart of Silicon Valley. Tell us about some of the programs at your school that tie into Silicon Valley.
So the way we approached that question was a little bit different than other institutions. We took one step back and we asked ourselves, what can we do that others cannot do? Because we cannot do everything. Being a strategy scholar, you have to have your own focus on everything. And then we have limited resources, and we don't have, as you said, our position is, our location in the Silicon Valley is where not most of the innovation is happening, or not most of the venture capital is flowing in, but still we are 20 minutes away to everything. We are 20 minutes away to Palo Alto, we are 20 minutes away to Berkeley, we are 20 minutes, 25 minutes away to downtown San Francisco. Very central location, but innovation and entrepreneurship was not happening that much. So the way we approached that question was, as I said, what can we do differently? So our program is more hands-on, niche, but we focus on more making real connections. Our chances, 80%, 85% of our alumni stay in the Bay Area, and they end up working for many tech companies or venture capital firms. So we have a strong alumni that we can tap into, and we might make them to many programs, classes, our own incubation to provide more hands-on help for our startups. And similar to you, we are also, because of our location in East Bay, many of our students are coming from families that are having either financial hardships or other hardships in their life. So social entrepreneurship is a big focus of our program. I actually had a few startups just last year, I'm not saying one, a few startups who were focusing on drug addiction, how to handle drug addiction as in the families, like having been raised in a family with fentanyl addicts in the family, right? How can you support them, and then how can you continue regular family relationship in a family like that? So I had a few startups trying to focus on that problem, and I think our unique location enables us to focus on problems like that. So for the people, for our amazing entrepreneurs in the audience, again, we have been saying it, all academics, and you have been hearing it everywhere, don't start with the technology, because technology will pass. Don't start with the AI, but the problems will stay, right? So focus on the problem that actually makes you passionate to solve, right? And you will find the technology to solve it. I think our unique location and our hands-on approach at Cal State East Bay helps us to give them the proper support, the proper kick, so that we can give them some kind of seed support to go to the next stage.
So for aspiring entrepreneurs out there, I hope you keyed into the last point that Izette just made, which was focus on the problem. If you sit in front of a funder, a VC, or an angel investor, and you present your idea, they'll nod and say, that's very nice. What problem does that solve? So that needs to be your whole philosophy on whatever project you're going to work on. Now, related to that, I'm going to ask a question on an idea, and I want to ask each of the panelists to provide their input on this question. But first, I'm going to start with the audience. So I'm going to use a term that is in entrepreneurship and innovation. And if you're familiar with this term in that realm, please raise your hand. The term is the valley of death. How many of you have heard the term valley of death? Okay, that's about half of you. So roughly the idea of the valley of death is in the beginning of an idea is just that. It's a thought, it's potential, it can be interesting and provoking of all kinds of future prognostications, but an idea is a thought at its end. Okay? That's the beginning of the valley of death, if you will. The other side is implementation. So there's this gap that exists between thought and implementation. And very roughly, that's the valley of death. I've trod all over this, but I'm going to ask each of these panelists how they see universities as potentially helping innovators cross the valley of death from idea to implementation. So Tarek, give us your thoughts on that, if you would.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on what we just stopped talking about is the, how do you solve a problem for an entrepreneur? I think the difference between good entrepreneur and great entrepreneur is good entrepreneurs always solve a problem. Great entrepreneurs create a problem that didn't exist and then solve them. So yesterday we heard Marty Cooper who actually was the first person who Qualcomm, created the mobile phone. He solved the problem. I think what Steve Jobs did is he brought your calculator, your credit card, your navigation, your music, everything into a smartphone, and then created a bigger smartphone we call iPad, and then created a laptop, right? So those problems were not existing. So an amazing entrepreneur, a great entrepreneur is, if you want to be unique, think about from your ideation, what is the problem that it didn't exist today? Because if you're going to create a problem, it's going to be your problem. And then find a solution for that, because then you'll have no competition in that. So I think the space between the initiation and execution is very important. But if you make it unique, then only you know the code to solve that. And I think that's what the education institutions can do. One thing that education institutions have done, that they have created a conducive environment, and the risk-taking has become fashionable all of a sudden, which is a good thing. But risk-taking, not the classic risk-taking that many of us, our generation people did, but the new risk-takers are, every generation is smarter than the previous generation. Not because they are smart, from the brain-wide system. They are smart because their access to information is very different. When I was in college and I wanted to find out what is the most traveled country in the world, I went to the library, I ordered the book, it came after a week, I read the book about an hour and found out that France is the most traveled country, followed by Spain and US. How long would it take somebody to find that out today? It's a nanosecond job. So I think for entrepreneurs is learn everything that you can from the institution, but strategy is very important. But Wells Fargo, former CEO John Stomp said, we can leave our strategy in a plane and not worry about it because no one can implement. The implementation is the key, how well you execute and implement that strategy. And I think a great entrepreneur would be someone who have a unique way of implementing that strategy.
I'll give you a quick answer. The way we help the startups in our ecosystem to pass that value of that is we build these I call them friendly environments, beta markets, where they can fail at a smaller scale, fail fast, and the customers, consumers, the early users are completely fine because they know that they are coming from our university ecosystem. So their customers, consumers, and users, they know that these are early stage startup founders by students. So we create this healthy kind of a small like space environment for them at the early stage where they can fail fast, learn fast, so that we build this resilience at the beginning before actually taking them to the real world.
Try to make it quick too, because I saw the 5-minute sign come up. I think I mentioned a lot of the activities we do at SDSU to really support our students as they go through the journey. But I also want to point out, like, out of the companies that we supported by our students, the one that are successful about 1 in 10. However, that doesn't mean the other 9 don't go on to do really great things. And actually, many of our most successful companies came out of those 9 out of 10 who did something after they left us, after they fell with us. Because it is all the things we talked about. It's the mindset. It is the understanding how to do customer discovery. It is how to talk to people and how to pitch. We teach all of those things, and we allow them, like you said, to fail in a safe environment, quicker, faster, and once they go out, they have the tools in their hands. And they come back to us. It's not like let them go and they don't come back and talk to us about how to do this. But I do think if you look from a historical standpoint, having been doing this as an institution for a long time, you have to help them understand how to do it, but then you have to accept them back in those phases later when they're doing other things, not the company or the idea they pitched the first time to you.
So, Valley of Death, I mean, first of all, there's more than one Valley of Death. It's unfortunately, sorry, but it's a sawtooth thing. It's actually not just one and I'm done kind of thing. But I mean, I agree with everything that's been said already in terms of how our institutions can help people get over that. I guess I'd just take a slightly different perspective on it, and it's about engagement. Rather than this innovation thing of being this linear thing where you hand the bat on to the next, to the next, to the next, you know, and there's somebody waiting at the end. That doesn't work. That's no good. It has to be this completely sort of circular thing where the end user is there right at the very beginning talking to the people who are thinking about developing technologies, right? You have to have that kind of circular economy rather than this linear thing. You can put lots of things in place, programs and so on, you know, similar to what Hala was describing. It's mentors, that's what they are, right? These are experts in the marketplace coming and talking to our students very early on so that they give that direction. You know, we put $1 million a year into developing technologies for these people informed by industry and investors. We're putting a fund in place, which is our investors on the investment committee, to tell our students, you know, what ideas are going to work. So all of these kind of programs create this circular engagement as opposed to the linear thing. But I think we need to think a hell of a lot bigger than that, frankly. You know, our institutions they have this incredible, what's the word I'm looking for, intelligence, right? There's this huge number of people in our institutions who know what the future could look like 10 years from now. And then the market knows what it looks like right now and what it might look next year and the year after kind of stuff. We have to think of much, much better ways of creating fora or frameworks that allow the intersection of those two things and more engaged conversations to happen on a broader level. So that's what we're doing or trying to do at our campus. Taking, what are we good at? We're good at space, we're good at AI and health, we're good at military stuff, defense, that kind of stuff. But how do you build these communities which create exactly what you're saying and eliminate the value of debt to the extent that you can?
Thanks, Paul. So just to put a bow on this value of death idea, when an entrepreneur goes and stands in front of an investor, a wise man once told me, I have 5 ideas before I brush my teeth and nobody's paying me for those, okay? So ideas are important. Implementation is everything when you stand in front of an investor. They'll want to see your path to implementation. They will ask, have you taken the first 2 or 3 steps towards that? Do you have a customer that will pay you for your idea? So implementation is very important. That's the key to crossing this valley of death from idea to execution. So our time is up. I want to thank the panelists for their time, for traveling here, for their considered ideas and thoughts. Unfortunately, this is not a Q&A. There wasn't Q&A time allotted for this, but I know that the panelists would be happy to take questions afterwards if you do have some. So let's have a round of applause for our panelists.